Hello everyone, this is Andrew. Welcome to Keen on America.
On July 4th, 2026, America will be 250 years old. An anniversary that will, no doubt, be greeted with a mixture of celebration, contemplation, and resignation. In Keen on America, Andrew talks not just about the American past and present, but also speculates on its future. What, Andrew asks, will be the 21st century fate of this now venerable American republic?
Hello everybody, it is May the 15th, 2025. I think this is going to go out tomorrow. Today in the United States, the news is dominated by Walmart, the largest retailer. Their stock has fallen 3% after the company warns of tariff-driven price increases. Higher prices are coming, so that's something that Trump critics will say, well, we told you so. And Walmart has been very overt in its warnings about raising prices. I'm sure it's not going to thrill a certain Donald Trump, but there are certain realities, and there are realities, of course, at Walmart. When you go to the store or when you go to the online store, you see a remarkable, almost a miraculous market of manufactured goods. My guest today on the show is an expert on manufacturing. Tim Minshall is a professor of manufacturing at Cambridge University. He's a member of the Institute for Manufacturing there, and the author of an appropriately relevant new book, How Things Are Made. Tim is joining us from Cambridge, where he lives and teaches. Tim, I wonder, someone maybe 300, 400, 500 years ago, if they were to wander into a Walmart these days, would they treat it as a magical experience, something that they could never have imagined?
It's a great way to put it, and thank you for inviting me along. There is something quite extraordinary that I think we have lost touch with, and slight misunderstanding of how far we've advanced in that period. From, think back in the day, pre-industrial revolution, goods were made to order. You wanted a thing, it would be made for you. There was a sort of a direct link there between this thing is broken, I don't have this thing, please make me this thing. Through 3 industrial revolutions to a point where, well, arguably 4, to a point now where the treasure trove of goods available to us is just mind-boggling. So I think the quick answer to your question is yes, they would be amazed. It would feel like a cave of wonders. It's just absolutely extraordinary. And I think what's been troubling me for a while is how we've sort of forgotten how that all works. How do we end up with all this stuff? How do we end up with this ability to make millions, billions of products and get them in exactly the right place at a reasonable cost, at a good quality, delivered almost instantly? That process is extraordinary how that happens. And yet for many of us, pretty much invisible.
Yeah, it's a form of magic which we take for granted. And I wonder whether, in your view, there's something particularly ironic and absurd about the fact that now, you don't need me to tell you this, the supply chains around the world are so sophisticated that we can manufacture kettles and airplanes and bicycles and everything else that you can get in Walmart around the world, whether it's India or particularly China, and it's all seamless. And at the same time, we have the reactionary politics of people like Donald Trump, who fetishizes the lie of making everything in America when we know that that's not possible. So how do you, I mean, you're not a professor of politics, but how do you explain this reactionary turn when it comes to trade and manufacturing? Is it just a childish kind of nostalgia, or is there something darker there?
I think there's something lighter there as well, if I may. There's pretty clear evidence that shows the ability to make things is an essential, I think what they call, economists would call a sovereign capability. The ability to actually produce stuff when you need it is vital. That does not mean that you need to make everything yourself. That kind of breaks the whole principles of competitive advantage and comparative advantage that make the world work. We can't make everything within our borders, and neither should we. But I think there is something pretty clear that says the ability to make some things really matters. And actually, if you try and find an economy that is balanced, that is resilient, that provides good jobs, that has no manufacturing, the list is pretty short. Often people point to places like Switzerland and go, well, they've done it right. They, financial services. It's one of the highest proportional value-added economies through manufacturing, through their precision engineering, through their food manufacturing, through their pharmaceuticals. There is evidence, absolutely clear evidence, that having some manufacturing, an appropriate balance of manufacturing for your part of the world, for your part of the country, really does matter. The trouble is when you extend that logic and go, well, surely more manufacturing would be better. Wouldn't it be great if we did everything? Then you've overshot. You go, no, that's not how it works at all. And I think there is exactly as you say, a slight risk of fetishizing manufacturing that's inherently good. So doing lots more of it would be good. No, you definitely can overshoot on this one. And I think we have one of the reasons I wrote the book was to say, let's write down what it actually is and why it's important and why we need to do it better. Not just blindly, it's a brilliant thing, let's just do lots more of it. So trying to get that nuanced debate there. But you can only do that if you take a look at it, if you can see what's happening. And this was the astonishing thing I found during COVID was in the UK, and I'm sure it was not dissimilar in the US, the genuine shock on so many people's faces going into stores and finding empty shelves, going to Amazon and seeing it didn't say, Prime delivered tomorrow. It said 2 to 3 weeks and then, longer and then not available or price skyrocketed. We'd not really experienced that in wealthy economies for a very long time. And so to us in manufacturing, well, that's an obvious thing that's going to happen when you have a pandemic. But it was a shock to so many other people, and then frantically trying to recover from that. And the big companies, the super logistics companies like Amazon and others, reacted to it really well, and they responded. But when we looked at our healthcare systems and said, oh, we need to be able to make face masks and gloves and gowns and not just those sort of relatively simple things, but medical ventilators and pharmaceutical products. We need to be able to make these things. And if you can't make them, you don't have the capability because all your manufacturing's disappeared, that's a massive issue. So there's a whole resilience argument about this. Just stepping forward from that to where we are at the moment in the world and where we sadly may be heading, there's also the whole, of course, defense argument to this, sovereign capability to ensure national security. But again, back to your point, it's not that just doing more and doing all of it would solve all the problems, but having none of it will definitely create massive problems.
Before we went live, you were asking me my take on the US, but I'm actually more interested in some way, Tim, on your take on the US. Given you're interested in manufacturing, your book has 2 titles. It's the same book. Your Life is Manufactured, which is the title of the UK version, came out earlier this year, and then it's called How Things Are Made in the US. The reviews in the UK have been very good, and there's the classic Make Britain Make Again from the Times review. But as Britain is, and correct me if I'm wrong, the home of the original manufacturing revolution, or certainly the industrial manufacturing revolution, what lessons would you give as a thinker, a historian of manufacturing and the rise and fall of great manufacturing powers like the UK and maybe the US? What lessons can the US learn from Britain's moment in terms of dominating manufacturing?
Whoa, what a great question. So I don't think we can go back to where we were. So whatever happened back in the past, we're not there now. And maybe just a quick gallop through, I'll try and do 250 years of history in less than a minute. So
first, you can have 2 minutes, Tim. I'll be generous.
Thank you. You're more generous than our students. I have a minute. The first industrial revolution, as you say, that was about, controlling power, so you could actually have factories run that didn't, and you could power systems to make things. That was really important. Then the second one was very US focused, the one that brought us the interchangeable parts and the assembly line and all those good things. And then the third one, the application of computing power and robotic and, well, more broadly, automation systems. And then this sort of new version we're facing now, which is arguably the third one extended, or a fourth one, which is, it's not just about having computers and robots, it's about connectivity and ubiquity of compute power distributed right down to the individual products, individual production lines. So that, I guess, if there's a lesson, it is that things are constantly changing. I think that's one thing we're seeing missing from part of the debate. There's sort of this assumption that we need to go back to how things were. The world has moved on. We're not in the same world anymore. So I think, as many of us do, are very cautious about a nostalgia-based economic argument. And we are certainly in the UK victims of this. We tend to look back at this mythical period where it was all good and now it's not, so why can't we go back? The world's moved on. There are lots of good things we can do. There's lots of good things the US can and is doing to support this. And I think we have been on parallel paths, slightly offset in the UK and the US, which was all through the 80s, as we saw some manufacturing industries struggling on a cost basis. Very economically rational decision to say, well, if someone else can do it cheaper and better than you do it, the production part, why not let them do it? And so the shift of manufacturing to China, when it was very much a cost activity, Britain did it, the US did it, other countries did it, Germany less so, but it did as well. And then you get to a point where you've sort of broken your model. You said, right, it's not just that this bit has gone over there and we have the bits around it still, those other bits go as well. And this argument about that, we can come back to maybe talking about Apple and its current situation. It's not just that there's an assembly plant that is in one place and could be somewhere else. It's all the suppliers, all the skills, all of those activities. Once they've gone, very hard to bring back. And so Britain has been facing this since, well, it was identified as a big problem in the late 90s, but it was happening. And people said, oh, yes, that does seem to be a thing. And maybe the lesson that can be taken from the UK situation was, it's okay. We're a knowledge economy now. We have very strong financial services. We can build our economy by providing the intellectual property and the financial services that people want to buy. We don't need to make stuff. And then 2007 indicated financial services, not the entire economy based on that. And then this issue of, yes, but the value add from intellectual property, from inventions, comes by also being able to make them. Not all of them and not the whole process, but if you've let all of it go, it actually damages your ability to come up with new ideas. And this is something that was identified by a couple of academics in the US, I think at Harvard Business School, Gary Pisano and Willie Shee, looking at this issue of, once you let the manufacturing go and the industrial commons have all gone, you're then left with great universities who are and great companies generating ideas, but the ability to convert the ideas into products is so much harder if all the manufacturing's somewhere far away and maybe not even owned by you. So that's maybe the key lesson, is a belief that you can survive on financial, entirely service-based economy. We nearly made that mistake. And secondly, if you just focus on it's okay, we can come up with the ideas, and the actual making it doesn't matter. I and many others just feel that's, and there's evidence to show that is wrong.
Yeah, it's an interesting take, Tim. You mentioned Trump and Apple and India. The headline in the FT today is that Trump lashes out. He's an expert lasher outer at Apple over plans to ship US iPhones from India. I don't want to turn this into another debate about Trump, because he's, as we discussed earlier, a little before we went live, rather an annoying, irritating fellow. But does he have a point? I mean, when you peel away all the nonsense, the rhetoric, the screaming and shouting, it's at the core of his argument. Then, are you suggesting that there may be a kernel of truth to his focus on making America, quote unquote, great again by focusing once again on American manufacturing?
So I have found myself in the slightly uncomfortable position on a few radio shows in the UK where shortly before going live, they've said, oh, by the way, we'd like to start with a question about Trump and tariffs. And I've gone, oh, okay. And then the question has been, so Professor Minshall, are you basically endorsing what Donald Trump is doing? I just take a breath and go, well, there is absolutely a kernel of truth there. The letting manufacturing disappear overseas, however well and fantastic quality products can be produced, and we as customers love the low cost, high quality, all those good things, but it can go too far. And so the idea of building up domestic manufacturing capability, I would agree with. And I think that's absolutely fine and sorry, should be encouraged. However, there are ways of doing that, and it's not a quick fix. So the idea that, and it was well documented in the press, for Apple to move their production back to the US would be incredibly difficult, because it's not just the assembly of all the components, it is all of the suppliers, and already the parts are shooting all around the world. There's a guy, what's he called? Edward Humes wrote a lovely book called Door to Door. I think I've got a copy up there. And he made the point that if you add up all the movement of all the components of a typical iPhone, it's around something like 6 times around the world, total.
Yeah, distance. I remember that argument.
Yeah. So things are moving all the time because they're located where the best skills are, the best capabilities are, and those have taken years to develop. You don't just learn to be really good at touchscreens. You don't just learn to be really good at CNC machining. It takes a long time. You can't just buy the kit and switch it on. You've got to have the workforce there. You've also got to have all the suppliers reasonably close by to work with you to develop new things. You can't, and I have a sadly now deceased friend, Finbar Livesey, who wrote a lovely book looking at this issue of globalization. He was very, very forward thinking back in the, 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. And he made this point, this debate where you just go, it's okay. We just pick up the factory and we move it back and plonk it down again. And the analogy he used, or the imagery he used, was from that Pixar movie Up. Remember that? The whole
with the house.
The balloons. Yep. And you just dump it down again. And Finbar, he made this point. He said, it's just not like that. It seems like that in a very, very simplistic way. It can't be like that. And we see this with TSMC, the semiconductor manufacturer, Taiwanese, and they've set up in Arizona. And, it's now going pretty well. But that took a long time to get right because the embedded skills of the workforce, not the workforce can't do it, they'd not had the experience of doing it. So that had to be built up over time. And all the suppliers, all of the issues that say, it's not just what's in this box, it's everything that plugs into this box. And that you can't recreate instantly overnight.
Yeah, it's a fascinating issue. You mentioned Germany. Germans are always pessimistic. That's their defining trait, of course, given their history. But are the Germans doing something that the British and the US don't do? You talked about the knowledge economy. I mean, that's the driving force of the US. Trump isn't willing to acknowledge it because most people, I think, in the knowledge economy are on the coasts and don't care for him. And I'm sure the same is true in London when it comes to manufacturing and Brexit and all the rest of it. But is the German model viable, Tim, with a substantial manufacturing economy, the apprentice system, an economy that really does focus on building high quality goods, especially for export?
Can I just jump in first, though, just go back to that knowledge economy comment? It's perfectly logical to have a strong knowledge economy. I think my point was it can't be only that. If you
I take your point.
Fine, that's fine.
But it is also interesting and important that I don't know whether people have done research. I don't even know how you define a knowledge economy, but I'm guessing that the vast majority of people in the knowledge economy are globalists, and yet they somehow dress their globalism up in a liberal morality and ideology to suggest that there's something good about globalization, when in fact it's good for them. It's good for their lifestyle, their income, their careers. It's not always good for the manufacturing center. And in the US, the last, I don't know, half century, certainly since the 1970s, of the US economy is of enormous prosperity on the coasts, where there isn't a great deal of manufacturing, and an economic catastrophe, one way or the other, in most of the rest of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a misalignment of what people regard as good, and yeah, completely agree that there is this. You can get swept along by the knowledge economy, and we can all become knowledge workers. And that again was one of the reasons I wrote the book, to go, yes, totally, you can do good. Thank you. There are good things that can be done, but someone's still got to make the stuff. And I just want to really emphasize this point. It's not just that, yes, someone's got to make it, because then the conclusion is, well, sure, let someone else make it. It's the fact the knowledge economy, so much of it relies on the very tight coupling of research and development with production. You need to have that close interaction.
So it's an intimacy, and in a weird way, that the real disconnect, to use sort of a metaphor, which is literal as well, is that whereas the knowledge and manufacturing economies are intimately bound up, they're inseparable.
Yeah, absolutely.
The human capital involved in those two sectors are often really separate and have no kind of understanding of how each one operates.
That's a great point. And that's why, we spend quite a lot of time thinking about how do you scale up the ability to make new things from science and technology. And that is exactly to your point there, because it's not about, okay, we can make one of these very clever quantum, whatever it may be, compute things on a lab bench. That's great. Now someone's going to make it. The truth is, to scale up a new technology to address a new market opportunity, you've got to have really smart financiers, really good legal support, really good HR. All of these things are needed. And it's, as to use your word, it's an intimate connection between those two. They're not, and we always struggle with this idea. There's a physical manufacturing economy and a service economy. There's massive overlap. They're not separate things. They're not separate worlds, and you can't just pick one and go, well, just do that one and not do this one.
So, and when we got a little bit waylaid, I asked you that question about Germany. How does Germany fit into these? Well, I want to come to China later, but is Germany the solution or the problem? I mean, often I joke in the show, everyone wants America to become like Denmark, which is absurd. And I'm sure you hear the same about Germany when it comes to manufacturing. Are they doing something right or something profoundly wrong?
I think the tense is important for me to answer that question. I think they are facing a number of major challenges at the moment. So one very specific manufacturing related example would be Volkswagen. So, massive organization, essential part of the whole automotive sector is a vital part of the German economy. And there's a massive transition going between internal combustion engine powered vehicles to electric vehicles. That is a huge shift. The typical number of components in a petrol diesel powered vehicle is about 30,000. In an electric vehicle, it's about half that. And while some of the components are the same, you still need wheels and brakes and all that, and doors and stuff, awful lot of the components come from different suppliers. So how do you manage a transition? So where Germany has been incredibly powerful and successful is building up resilience in industries that are reasonably stable and ideally growing at a reasonable rate. But it's more about the consistent demand. And so you then have a system that brilliantly integrates the university system with the regional college system, with the school system, everything and the banking system fits in very, very well as well. Strong unions, it all makes sense. And so that if you are BMW or Mercedes or Volkswagen, there will be a supply of workers and they'll be very skilled and you'll be supported to recruit people, develop them, and you'll be able to keep them maybe all through their careers. You can do amazing things. And that works really well in conditions of technological stability.
Is that a contradiction, Tim? I know you're going to come to but is that a contradiction in terms? conditions of manufacturing stability in the 21st century. Is that possible?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well picked up on. Yes, no, yes or no. You can't have the two. Manufacturing is in a constant process of change. And there's if I may, there's a particular technology that illustrates this to me superbly well. I'm just going to reach down.
Yeah, he's pulling he's pulling his pants down. He's pulling something out. What is it, Tim? For people just listening, Tim is waving a complicated industrial instrument at the screen. What is it, Tim?
Well, I wish it's actually something very familiar. It is one of the very earliest mobile phones.
Oh my God! Yeah,
this is one of those ones.
What was that, from the 90s or 80s?
Yeah, 80s. So this is about the size of a car battery or a large loaf of bread. Weighs significantly more.
And probably obscenely expensive in the 80s, I'm guessing.
Extremely expensive and very, very to buy it or lease it. And then there was the whole issue around call time and coverage and all those things. The reason
and we should wave. I'm just on the small screen, but of course we can wave our phones now, which are about 100th of the size and about 1 million times more powerful, and can do many other things apart from making calls.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to wave something else here. Just a moment, I'm waving one, which is this is the Wall Street phone. This is Michael Douglas, kind of the one that Michael Douglas nearly had in Wall Street in 1984. Something that you could just about fit in your pocket if you didn't mind half of it sticking out. Incredible improvement.
You have to have a big pocket to put that one in, Tim.
Yeah. So we see this technology, you're absolutely right, is constantly changing, and manufacturing has to constantly change with it. But there's two different types of change. There is the make the giant big phone much smaller and add functionality to it. That's a process of very impressive incremental improvements, and manufacturing is constantly finding ways to not only deal with the fact we can squeeze yet another billion transistors onto the microprocessor, onto the silicon wafer, but also we can make it cheaper, we can make it more reliable. And so, as you said, it's not just that the phone got smaller, it's the phone went up orders of magnitude in functionality. The phone is the least of its features really nowadays. So there's that, but there's a different type of change, which is, and you're quite right, this is happening all the time. The other type of change is the kind of disruption, I'm using the term very loosely there, where a totally new thing comes along going, we're not going to do it that way, we're going to do it this way, analog to digital, petrol to electric. These are massive changes. And that's really what I meant in the German context, that it's really good with the incremental stuff, does it really well. I mean, the improvements in cars that have been driven by both the US and Japan and Germany in particular, is phenomenal. But when something comes along that just says this model doesn't work anymore, almost a Kodak-like moment where we just suddenly go, nope, we're not going to have roll films, we're going to have digital. Just, whoa, how do you deal with that? And I think this is where the German system is perhaps less good, because you've built up all the apprenticeship systems, you've built up all the school systems and the college system and the supply networks for a thing, and to make that thing ever, ever better. When a new thing comes along, you can't move quickly to respond to it. And there's an FT journalist wrote a book about Germany. He is German, and he gave it the rather blunt title of Kaputt. And it was about the German economy, saying, he's lived there, he knows it, he's seen other parts of the world. And he said, they've got a huge problem, because how do you respond to this extraordinary wave of technology driven by digitalization?
And of course, maybe one word for that German problem is China. The headlines today are about who's winning between Trump and Xi on the current wave of tariffs. A lot of people claiming that Trump blinked first. He would never acknowledge it. The take in China is that he has. The Chinese remarkable success with automobile manufacturing and electric vehicles and maybe even self-driving cars now is the challenge in Germany. Is China, Tim, just the new Britain, the new America, the new Germany, or is there something historically different about what the Chinese are doing in dominating global manufacturing and supply chains?
Great question. So I'm not a historian, but so I'm just an observer when it comes to history. But one argument is, yes, we just go, there's a constant shifting of power and a shifting of capabilities, and that's just a process that happens, and there's always pain at the transitions. That's one argument. Another one is, no, it is different. And one of the reasons it's different is because of the inherent interconnectivity. Well, three things probably. We'll go with just two. One is manufacturing systems are way more complex, and that everything is distributed and intimately connected. And I think this is one of the, if I dare say it, positives to come out from some of the rather blunt narrative around tariffs, is it forced people to look at what's happening with automotive production in the US and how many times things cross borders between Mexico and the US and Canada and the US. We have the same situation in the UK when Brexit came along, suddenly going, oh, hang on a minute. We have bits of the car processed, the engine blocks sent, to mainland Europe, then brought back again. Suddenly we've got all this complexity that means countries can't operate in isolation. It doesn't make sense. It would just be, if you did try and give it all within one shore, the product would become either ludicrously expensive or not very good. So that's one thing. The complexity of our manufacturing systems means one reason it's probably different this time. The other one is it's not just about the product. It's not just about the product. It's about the data that goes with it. And if you look at the typical, modern car, whether it's electric or not, there are millions of lines of code. There are dozens, in some cases, depending how you define it, hundreds of microprocessors scattered around that car. We're building mobile computer systems. And it is almost impossible for one country to possibly be able to do all of those technologies. So I guess what I'm responding to your point is, could China just sort of, it's gone from the UK to the US to China, it's just their turn to be absolutely dominant? Well, they certainly have lots of capabilities around that, but even they can't operate in isolation. So in a way, it's just a slight shifting of the balance of power. And we haven't really talked about countries like Russia and Mexico and others that, play a critical role in all of this, regardless of what else may be going on. So I think it's a bit of the same, but I think it's also a wee bit different as well. There is something different because we are so interdependent, right down to the level of the individual little bits of technology that are stuck in this, that are tracking, where I am, what I'm doing, how I do it, all the apps that go with it. All of the embeddedness of our physical products means that it's naturally much more interconnected. And we see that with AI. Are we going to end up with a...
Right. So, of course, I was planning on asking you the AI question. How things are made is the title of your new book. Will AI, I'm sure you get asked this question all the time, but is AI going to profoundly change everything when it comes to manufacturing? Are we going to have factories, I know they already exist, particularly in China, where you just have smart machines making things?
Well, that's not an AI thing. We've had lights out factories. Japan was, amazing in this back in the day. We literally got robots building robots, and you go, why turn the lights on? It's just robots building robots. Very impressive. But that was back in the 90s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. So I think the AI...
When you say robots building robots, what exactly does that mean? I didn't know that robots were even available in the 90s.
Yeah. So these are industrial robots. So the big ones you see doing pretty much every time there's a news story about manufacturing or cars, they'll show a production line where they're welding together the body components, and they'll always clean them up a bit so they spark a lot, so they look good on TV. Those robots. So companies like Fanuc and Kuka and others who make these incredible machines. The Fanuc factory in Japan was literally having the robots build other robots, and you didn't need to have people wandering around, only for certain things. But to your point about AI, a couple of examples. One, going right back to something pretty fundamental. So there's a way of describing certain bits of industry and certain products which are called foundation products. So these are things like steel, cement, paper, sugar, glass, things that are done on a continuous basis and are vital products for lots of other things. Those have been craft driven. Incredible sophistication of the steel worker, incredible sophistication of the glass maker, employing thousands of people to be really, really good at making things and building up expertise over their whole career. Over time, those systems have become more and more automated. They've just taken people out and said, well, we now know how it works. We don't need so many people. And now, because they're so massively energy consumptive, trying to find ways to reduce energy consumption, deploying AI onto those systems to make them super efficient is happening. And what it's triggered is an interesting problem where you have super experienced people who are probably in their 40s, 50s, maybe even older, who really understand the physical process of making glass or steel or cement. And you have super bright people who are really good at optimizing data. And what these companies need and what manufacturing needs is people who have both skills. A whole bunch of people who are super good at AI, but don't understand how physical properties change with materials. And a bunch of people who only get the understanding of the physical properties of materials and how you make them, who don't understand AI, is a problem. So we've seen this interesting thing where AI is coming together so that those super experienced people can be working with AI to make the jobs even better. And dare I say, as they move on, some of those skills can be embedded in AI systems. Not all of them, but some of them can be. So that's one AI manufacturing anecdote. The other one is the slightly bizarre concept of, in the book I talk about this, like there are two giant machines that are essential for the world. One is the internet, and of course that is one of the biggest physical manufactured products ever made, and it constantly needs, to your point about change, constantly needs upgrading, constantly needs improving. It's a massive manufactured product. That's one. The second example I use, which links to AI, is this idea that to make the microprocessors that power AI, this is a fantastically complicated process. So to make the chips that make AI work, to go into those massive server farms, requires AI to be deployed. I just had to stop myself and go, what? So we've got AI, to make AI chips, you need AI to work to make the chips that make AI possible.
Yeah, it's the classic chicken and egg.
But it's happened. And so companies like NVIDIA.
Yeah, we did a show a couple of weeks ago on NVIDIA.
Right. And it's just extraordinary how rapidly that's happening. So you get this incredible speed of deployment of AI and the way we've just absorbed it into our lives. But we see it has a real tangible effect in the manufacturing world. Because all those GPUs have to be built by someone, but also that industry requires AI to allow it to function. I think that's really interesting. So without becoming a salesman too much for manufacturing and jobs, those who have the skills, understanding the value and role of AI, but who also understand the physical messiness of making real products, people who have that balance of skills, I think are going to be hugely in demand in the future. Well, now and certainly in the future. That's not going away.
Yeah, and that's one of the ironies of AI. It seems to it seems to inflate our value, or some of our values as human beings. I'm sure at your institute at Cambridge, you're training this next generation of AI experts when it comes to manufacturing. Finally, Tim, we got another Tim on our show, another British academic in a few weeks, Tim Jackson, who's a great, I'm sure you know his work, great critic of capitalism and of the environmental consequences. You also have some concerns about that, I know, in the book, How Things Are Made, A Journey Through the Hidden World of Manufacturing. Many pessimists like Jackson believe that if we maintain the pace of the current manufacturing and industrial or post-industrial revolution, we're going to destroy the planet. What's your take on this? And do we need to be more local in terms of focusing on manufacturing things if we're to save the environment?
It's a great point. There's two things that jumped out very quickly when I started doing the book. One was to make sure that we had this good sense of how the thing works, because there are two major things wrong with it that we need to sort out. Number one is resilience, which we talked about a bit earlier. It's this whole system we've built is incredibly fragile. Second thing is it's also incredibly damaging for the planet. You know, all of this, the way we make things, the way we move so much stuff around, all of those 6-time around the world journeys, that's generating a lot of pollution and consuming a lot of energy and creating pollution too. So what a conclusion I came to, and we try to make the book accessible for everybody. So we start with, how you make something in a kitchen as a manufactured product, right the way through to how do you make an iPhone, how do you build an NVIDIA chip. So I guess the 2 points. One is we've got to be better at how we manufacture things. So do it in a less harmful way, right? So that can be maybe don't move things around so much, be a bit smarter about what we're actually making. So we need to manufacture better. And we also need to manufacture better things, by which I mean we need to build all those systems that are going to manage the energy transition. Someone's got to build these massive solar farms and all of these battery storage systems. They've got to be made. All those electric vehicles or maybe hydrogen vehicles, they've all got to be made. So it's making manufacturing better and manufacturing better things. But there's another point that's really important that links to Tim Jackson, and that is this strange world we've ended up with where we regard manufacturing as something else. It just sits removed from our lives. You know, the analogy someone gave me was, it's like the sewage system. We're going to know it's there.
Yeah.
We don't ever see it unless it goes wrong, but we would like it to work. We don't want to get too involved in it. Tragically, to me, manufacturing's ended up in the same category. And it's so wrong, because if you just break manufacturing down into three things, the stuff, we make stuff. What happens in a factory? What happens in a workshop? There's a making bit. Secondly, there's a moving bit. There's lots of incredible, sophisticated logistics, which has to be managed well, and we've got to do it better. But the third bit is consumption. Make, move, consume. It's us. And all these arguments about, oh, well, why do manufacturers do this? Or why do manufacturers do that? Very often the answer is because it's what we want. And we can't disconnect ourselves from it and just go, yeah, not my problem. I want the world to be clean and perfect, and I want industry to sort itself out. No, we are part of it. We make choices, whether we're individually as consumers or whether we're parts of our local community or in our companies. We make choices. We are part of the manufacturing world.
Yeah, I mean, Marx made that point in the 19th century. It doesn't seem as if anything's really Marx and Engels. Engels, of course, knew factories better than Marx. So nothing much has changed in the last couple, in a sense, nothing much has changed over the last couple of 100 years.
Although all I'd say is, but I think we've forgotten that. So the message it's been there all the time. We've not been paying attention to it, and we've allowed it to become this far away other world that we don't need to worry about.
Yeah, and the subtitle of the American version is A Journey Through the Hidden World of Manufacturing. It's the dark world, it's the sewage system, which we'd rather avoid. We just go to the bathroom and don't think about the consequences.
Right.
The book has the British title, Your Life is Manufactured. Maybe a third title, Tim, would be your How to Manufacture Better. Maybe that can be the title of your next book. An important conversation. You talk about the consequences. We're doing this electronically, so it's a manufactured conversation on the manufactured, the jewel of our human achievement when it comes to manufacturing, the internet. Maybe next time we can do it in person, although that would involve me flying over to the UK, or you flying to California. Anyway, an important conversation. Tim, you bring great knowledge and sophistication and entertainment to this all-important subject. Your new book, How Things Are Made, A Journey Through the Hidden World of Manufacturing, is out in the US. So congratulations on that. And thank you so much for a really fascinating tour of our manufacturing world. Thank you so much, Tim Minshall.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.